of Orthodox spirituality.
Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.
Hello, dear listeners. We are continuing to read from the book Spiritual Awakening, the second volume in the series Spiritual Counsels by Saint Paisios.
Amen. By grace didst thou transform the northern wilderness.
Let us give spiritual comfort to the people. The continuation. There in the Kalivi, I become a program for the people. As I'm inside reading the Psalter, they're outside knocking on the door. I tell them, in 15 minutes, and they shout, "Hey, Father, stop praying for a minute. God won't be offended if you do." That's how far they go. It's not only that I'll interrupt my prayer, but if I go outside, it's all over. I have to manage to finish all I can before then. By 6:30 in the morning, I have to have finished even my daily vespers in order to manage. So for me, it's like, O morning light of the holy glory. By the time you finish your orthros, I'm already all done with the koboskinia of the vespers. Koboskini, plural koboskinia, is the black woolen prayer rope with knots used by Orthodox Christians to recite the Jesus prayer. If I get a chance to have some antidoron in the morning, all's well and good. Afterwards, I can't even get a cup of tea. I'm dead, ready to collapse. Even during Bright Week after Pascha, I had to observe the 9th hour and the 3-day rule. Abstention from food and drink until the 9th hour, 3 p.m., by the Byzantine reckoning, or for 3 days. Whether you can or not, you must do it. One day, I don't know what obstacles people faced. Maybe there was a storm at sea, and there was no boat. But no one showed up at the Kalivi. Oh my, I had a day like those I used to have on Mount Sinai when I lived in the cave of Saint Epistemi. The elder lived an ascetic life in the cave of Saint Epistemi on Mount Sinai during the years 1962 to 1964. So you see, when the sea has a storm, I have calm. But when the sea is calm, then I have a storm. I could, of course, go somewhere on retreat. Do you know how many have offered to cover the expenses and send me to California or to Canada? You must come, they say. We have a Hesychasterion there. If I should find myself in an unfamiliar place, it would be like I was in paradise. Nobody will know me, and I will have my rule to live as a monk, as I desire. But you see, a soldier is discharged only after the war is over. Now we are at war, in a spiritual war. I must stay at the front lines. There are Marxists, Masons, Satanists, and so many others. There are so many who are possessed by demons, anarchists, suffering from delusions, and they come to me asking me to bless their beliefs. And there are so many sent to me by others without any preparation, some only to get rid of them, and others so that they won't be the ones to pull the chestnuts out of the fire. If you only knew how hard-pressed I am from so many directions. I'm so embittered by others' pain. But I feel consolation in my heart. If I were to go away, I'd see it as a retreat, abandoning the front line. It would be a betrayal. That's how I see it. It's not as if I set out to do these things or help the monasteries. I started out for one thing, and now I find myself doing something else, and how must I struggle? And you see, no one else is reacting. Who cares if people are trying to destroy the church? They'll tell you, oh, it doesn't matter. They're like feathers in the wind, so long as they are comfortable. How can they possibly be comfortable? They'll be made comfortable by Satan in the end. These are not honorable things. If I wanted to do what pleases me, well, you know how easy that would be. But the point is not to do what pleases me, but to do what pleases and brings consolation to others. If I were to think about my own ease and comfort, I could find a myriad of places and ways of doing that. But in order to enter the will of God, you have to be a doer of God's will, and not merely a servant of yourself. Part 1. The responsibility of love. The way of the Church is love. This differs from the manner of the legalists. The Church sees everything with forbearance and seeks to help each person, no matter what he may have done, no matter how sinful he may be. Chapter 1. The Indifferent Generation. Indifference to God breeds indifference to everything. What's that noise? It's an airplane, Yeroda. Close the window. We don't want it coming in. The world has gone so mad, even that could happen. Everything's falling apart. Family, education, public services. People don't care about anything. They are empty. Whose fault is it that we have come to this? I'm speaking in general terms. I just want to show you how indifferent people are. Go to any school and you'll see. For example, if open windows are banging in the wind, it's doubtful that even one child will care enough to shut them so they don't break. Some will gape, some will just sit back and watch them rattle, while others will merely pass by as if nothing is happening. Indifference. An army officer who was in charge of the oil depot used to tell me, I'm having a hard time finding a soldier to place on guard duty at the depot, one who will be responsible enough to keep others from starting a fire or be sure that he himself won't throw a cigarette. There is a half-hearted spirit, no manliness at all. We have completely gone bad. I wonder how God tolerates us. There was so much dignity in the old days. There was Filotimo. During the war in 1940 at the frontier, the Italians would sometimes have an encounter with the Greek guards and would visit their guard post, and to see the Filotimo of the Greeks. Once, when the Italians went to a Greek guard post, the Greeks offered them some coffee. One of the Greek officers took a handful of money out of his pocket, 50 and 100 drachma notes, and this money was worth something back then, and he set them on fire in order to boil the coffee. He wanted to show the Italians that Greece was a rich country. The Italians were impressed. See the spirit of sacrifice? Nowadays, we have been permeated by a spirit that one finds in communist countries. In Russia, even though they had an abundant crop this year, this was stated in 1990, there will be great hunger among the people. They did not harvest the grain on time. They went to harvest in the autumn. Is harvesting ever done in autumn? But if the crop is not their own, how can they ache enough for it to go and harvest? Their life is a drudgery. They don't have the drive to go and create something, because for so many years they were not free to create. There it goes, with an idle spirit, with this indifference. The whole country is sinking. Is it raining and the wheat is spread out? They don't care. Is it time to leave work? They leave work. The rain washes the harvested wheat away. The next day, they will go to work on time to gather what is left of it. But when the wheat is your own and it's spreading out on the threshing floor, if it should rain, would you ever leave it to be lost? No, you lose your sleep in order to save it. And even though you're so very tired, you feel joy, you feel delight. Indifference towards God leads to indifference towards everything else. It leads to disintegration. Faith in God is so very important. When man worships God, then he loves his parents too, and his home, his relatives, his work, his village, his whole region, his state, his fatherland. One who does not love God or his family is incapable of loving anything. And of course, he doesn't love his country either, which after all is but one big family. What I'm trying to say is that everything stems from faith in God. When a person does not believe in God, he doesn't care about his family, his village, or his country either. And all of these values are now falling apart. And this is why there is a spirit of idleness and indifference. A police officer wrote to me, "I couldn't come because I had a lot of work to do. There's only 2 of us covering an area that is supposed to be covered by 8. You see what's happening? Instead of assigning 2 more policemen, they're leaving only 2. Fortunately, there are exceptions. Once a father came to me and said, "Pray for my son Angelo because they're going to kill him." I had known his son, who was serving in the military at the time, since childhood. "Why, what's wrong?" I asked him. He said, "He found the others playing cards when they should have been on duty. He reprimanded them, they didn't listen. Then he went to report them and one of them threatened to kill him." "Look," I said, "they're not going to kill him, so don't worry about that. But I will pray for Angelo so they do not court-martial him for not playing cards with the others." I learned something else and said, "Glory be to God." There are still some Greeks who care about their country. An Air Force pilot had attempted to overtake some Turkish airplanes which had violated Greek airspace to take pictures in order to prove it. The others from the ground radio communications told him, "Let them go, don't bother." But he insisted and kept trying to overtake them. In the meantime, the Turkish pilot with the bigger airplane was flying faster and lowered his altitude, leading the poor Greek pilot to fall into the sea. And there are others who simply fly around in their airplane. What a difference. One has to grasp the real meaning to have a need to do what is good and right. Otherwise, all is idleness and indifference. You can't possibly force someone to go fight in a war. He'll be looking for ways to run rather than fight. But once he understands what harm the enemy can do, then he'll volunteer to go. People today are so self-centered. In the old days in Farasa, my homeland, people used to say, "If you have some work that needs doing, don't leave it for tomorrow. If you have some good food, save it for tomorrow when a visitor might come." Nowadays, people think, "Let's leave work for tomorrow when someone might come to help us, and let's eat the good food tonight." Today, most people are self-centered. They think only of themselves. Let's say it starts raining very heavily. You'll see that most of you will start thinking of whether you have laundry hanging on the clothesline and will hurry out to pick it up. This is not a bad thing, but our thoughts do not go any further. Even if they get wet, the clothes will dry again. But what about those people threshing their harvest? Do you feel for them, offer them a prayer? Or when lightning strikes, it is doubtful if a handful of people will think of the farmers or those who have greenhouses. People do not think of others. They don't go beyond themselves. Their thoughts constantly revolve around themselves. But when they revolve around themselves, they have themselves at the center, not Christ. They function outside the axis, which is Christ. In order to be able to think of others, the mind must first be with Christ. Then one can also consider the neighbor, the animals, and all of nature. His radio station is working, and as soon as a message is received, he runs to help. If our mind is not on Christ, the heart is not working, and as such, we love neither Christ nor our fellow human beings, not to mention nature, the animals, the trees, the plants. By living this way, you will never reach the point of having communication with the animals, the birds. If a bird were to fall from the roof, you would feed it. But if it does not fall from the roof, you do not think about feeding it. When I look at the birds, I say to myself, the poor birds need to be fed. And I throw some crumbs. I leave out some water. I see diseased branches on the trees, and I immediately think of cutting them off so the rest of the tree doesn't get infected. Even when a door or a window is banging, that's where my thought goes. I will forget myself if I should be needing something at that moment, and will tend to the door or the window so that they will not be damaged. I might think of myself as an afterthought. And if someone thinks and cares about the other creatures, how much even more must he think and care about their Creator? If man does not live like this, how will he ever communicate with God? Even when you simply go out, take a look around. Someone may have carelessly or maliciously, and I do hope no one would do that, thrown something to cause a fire. So take a look around. This too is a spiritual act, for even a glance can bear love. When I come out of my kalivi, I take a look downwards and I take a look towards the roof to see if something is burning, unless, of course, one has such faith that if something does catch fire, prayer alone will put out the fire. Otherwise, one must take action. Also, if I hear an explosion, I pay close attention to see what it is. Is it a gun? Are they practicing? Is it a blasting charge? My mind runs immediately to such concerns, so that I may direct my prayer with the komboskini. One who disregards himself out of love for others will have the great care of God, and all people will care for him. But today's generation is the generation of indifference. Most people are only for the parades. If something were to happen, don't even try telling them to defend themselves. And nowadays, they don't like parades either. In the past, at least, people would go to the parades, listen to a marching tune, and something would stir inside them. Today, we Greeks are idle and lack discipline. Of course, other nations are even worse, without any ideals. You see, the Greeks may have a whole lot of faults and blemishes in their character, but they have one gift from God, philotimo and levendia, bravery. They celebrate everything. Other nations do not even have these words in their vocabulary. We have a responsibility. This was related in 1992. An atheist to the bone had come to my kalivi once. After going on and on, he finally told me, "You know, I am an iconoclast." He believes in nothing, and yet he claimed to be an iconoclast. So I told him, "You godless fellow, how can you talk to me about being an iconoclast when you believe in nothing?" At the time of the iconoclastic controversy, some Christians fell into error through excessive zeal and went to the other extreme, but then the Church resolved the issue. It was never a matter of not believing in God. Iconoclasts were those Christians who refused to render honor to the icons. The iconoclastic controversy had thrust the Byzantine Empire into turmoil for more than a century, 726 to 843. It was resolved at first by the Seventh Ecumenical Council in 787, which condemned it as heresy. Rekindled by Emperor Leo V the Armenian, the controversy was finally settled by Patriarch Methodios in 843. He then went on to support the present situation, and then I really became angry with him. "How can the present situation be acceptable to you?" I told him. Judge is afraid to judge, indictments against criminals withdrawn because someone or another threatens them. Who is running the country? Are you comfortable with this situation? If you support such people, You're a criminal yourself. Why did you come to me? Get out of here." And I sent him away. Yeroda, aren't you afraid to speak like that? What is there to be afraid of? I have already dug my grave. If I had not dug my own grave, then I would be concerned about the person who would tire himself digging it. As it is now, someone only has to throw in a few shovelfuls of soil. I have in mind another atheist, a blasphemer, who has said the most blasphemous things about Christ and Panagia, one who is permitted to appear on television. Even the Church does not take a stand to excommunicate some of these people. Such people should be excommunicated, but the Church seems reluctant to do so. Yeroda, what would be accomplished with an excommunication when these people do not believe in anything anyway? It will at least show that the Church has taken a stand on the matter. Yeroda, is the silence of the Church an indicator of approval? Yes, someone wrote some blasphemous things about Panagia, and no one spoke up. Then I told someone, "Did you see what so-and-so has written?" And he told me, "Well, what can you do with those people? You'll get soiled if you try to deal with them." They're afraid to speak up. What did he have to fear, Yeroda? That people might write something about him and ridicule him in the press. And so he tolerates blasphemous things about Panagia. We want others to pull the chestnuts out of the fire so that we can have our peace of mind. This indicates a lack of love. Then man begins to act out of self-interest. This is why we see an all too familiar spirit today. Get to know so-and-so because he will then speak well of you. Be on good terms with so-and-so and he will not speak badly of you, and so forth. After all, we must not be taken for fools. We must not become victims. Another person remains indifferent and does not speak up. "I do not speak out," he says, "so that I won't be written up in the papers." In other words, most people are completely indifferent. For a long time, no one would write anything, but now some little effort is being made. Years ago, I had scolded someone on the holy mountain. "You are over-patriotic," he retorted. Not too long ago, he came back to find me and say, "They have destroyed everything, family, education." And I, in turn, told him, "You are over-patriotic." This whole situation has led to one bad thing and one good thing. The bad thing is that indifference has overtaken so many people who used to have something in them, but who now just say, "Who am I to solve the situation?" The good thing is the many people who are beginning to be troubled and to change for the better. Some even come to me and seek to justify a bad thing they did previously because they are now troubled by it. Yeroda, are we then always to confess our faith? Discernment is needed. There are times when we should not speak out, and other times when we should confess our faith with courage. Otherwise, we will bear a responsibility for not speaking out. During these difficult years, each one of us must do whatever is humanly possible. Whatever is not humanly possible, leave it to God. This way we will have a clear conscience that we did what we could. If we do not resist these evil things, our ancestors will rise up from their graves against us. They endured so many hardships for the homeland, and what are we doing for it? Greece, Orthodox Christianity, with her sacred tradition, her saints and heroes, is under attack by the Greeks themselves, and we do not speak out. It is a terrible thing. I told someone, "Why don't you speak out against what so-and-so is saying?" And he replied, "What can one say? That person is totally depraved." If he is totally depraved, all the more reason to speak out and strike him down. They do nothing. They let him go on with his depravity. I actually spat at one of the politicians in disdain. Say at least that you do not agree. Be forthright. Your attitude is that as long as you're all right, everything else can be ruined. If Christians do not confess their faith, if they do not react, such people will do even worse things. But if they react, then they'll think twice about it. But I suppose many Christians nowadays are not made for battles. The early Christians were tough nuts. They transformed the world. And during the Byzantine period, if even one icon was removed from the churches, the people rose up in protest. Here, Christ was crucified so that we may be resurrected, and we remain indifferent. If the church does not speak up so as to avoid a conflict with the state, if the metropolitans do not speak up in order to be on good terms with everybody, and especially with those who help them with the church foundations, if the monks of the Holy Mountain do not speak up for fear of losing their subsidies, who is going to speak up? The elders referring here to the financial aid provided by the Greek state to the monasteries of the Holy Mountain each year, since 1924, in exchange for their lands which were granted to the refugees who came to Greece after the Asia Minor catastrophe. I told one of the abbots, if they threaten to cut off your subsidy, tell them, we will then no longer provide hospitality to the pilgrims, so they will think twice about that. The professors of theology also do not speak out against these abuses. They reason, we are civil servants, we will lose our salary, how are we then to live? In the meantime, the monasteries have been caught up with the pensions. Why do you suppose that I do not want to receive even the small pension from the Farmers' Insurance Fund? It is not honorable for a monk to be insured as a farmer. To be insured as an indigent, yes, I can see that. It honors the monk. But to be insured as a farmer, why? A monk has disclaimed fat pensions, abandoned the world, and come to the monastery to receive a pension? We betray Christ for a mere pension. Yeroda, is it acceptable for a nun who may have worked as a teacher for some years to receive her rightful pension? Well, that's all right. But let me tell you, by giving this pension where it is needed, the nun will receive a good pension from Christ. Dear listeners, our show has come to an end. Thank you for listening. We will continue once again where we left off in our next show. Until then, be well.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
Readings of Orthodox Spirituality.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.